The morning it happened, the air smelled like burnt coffee and gasoline. I remember that clearly, the kind of smell that sticks to your throat and refuses to leave. I was standing in my kitchen, staring at the old clock above the fridge. 6:27 a.m. The second hand trembled, ticking towards something I didn't yet understand would be the end. Liam was still asleep in the living room, or pretending to be. He'd passed out on the couch again, controller in his hand, half-eaten pizza boxes stacked beside him. The kid was 26, but lived like a teenager who'd never learned what consequences were. I used to tell myself that wasn't his fault, that I'd spoiled him because he'd lost his mother too early, because life had been cruel enough already. Turns out, I was just making excuses for both of us. The night before had ended in shouting, not the kind of shouting that fades after a few minutes, but the kind that leaves something cracked behind. He'd slammed my bedroom door open, eyes glassy, reeking of whiskey. "Grandpa, sign the damn papers. It's just business," he said. He threw the folder onto my bed, a loan application. $82,000. I didn't even look at the numbers this time. I'd already seen enough fake promises, enough opportunities. "No," I told him. That one word, just 2 letters, felt like a grenade. He blinked, as if he couldn't believe it. "What did you say?" I said no, Liam. He laughed, a short, sharp sound that didn't belong in the mouth of the boy I once held in my arms. "You think you're some kind of hero now? You're just a tired old man with a trailer and a pile of useless savings. You owe me, you know that? Mom's dead because you weren't there that night. You should have been the one in that car, not her." I didn't answer. I couldn't. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame cracked. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at that folder lying on the floor. $82,000. The price of peace, the price of guilt, the price of being a fool one more time. By morning, the decision had settled in me like cold stone. I wasn't going to be Liam's grandfather anymore. Not the way I had been. Not the man who bailed him out of jail, who paid off his gambling debts, who pawned his watch to cover his rehab that lasted 3 days. That man had died the night before. I packed in silence, 1 duffel bag, 2 shirts, an old photograph of April, my daughter, smiling in front of her first car. She'd been 27 when she died, the same age Liam was now. I left her picture face down in a drawer. I couldn't take it with me. Outside, the desert sun was already sharp, slicing the horizon into gold and red. The trailer park was waking up, dogs barking, engines coughing to life. Nobody noticed me walking toward my truck. I liked it that way. Halfway to the car, I heard the screen door creak open behind me. "Where the hell are you going?" Liam's voice, hoarse, accusing. I didn't turn around. "Out," I said. "Out where?" "You can't just leave." "I can, and I am." He laughed again, but it wasn't anger anymore. It was disbelief. "You think this is some kind of movie, old man? You can't survive without me." That one made me stop. I turned and looked at him, really looked. He was wearing the same hoodie he'd had on for 3 days, hair greasy, eyes hollow. "My grandson, my burden, my creation." "Maybe," I said quietly, "but at least I'll die on my own terms." He took a step forward. "You walk out that door, you're dead to me." I nodded. "Then let me save you the funeral." And I left. The drive out of Albuquerque felt endless. Every mile was a memory. Little league games, Christmas mornings, hospital visits, lies, promises, second chances. I drove until the radio stopped picking up stations, until my hand stopped shaking. By the time I crossed the border into Arizona, the sun was sinking behind the red cliffs, and the only thing left inside me was silence. I stopped at a diner somewhere outside Holbrook, ordered black coffee and eggs I didn't touch. The waitress called me Han, without looking at me twice. That's when I realized nobody here knew me. Nobody cared who I was or what I'd done. And for the first time in decades, that felt like freedom. I spent that night in a cheap motel with flickering lights and a broken heater. The desert wind howled through the cracks in the window, and I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, replaying his words. "You should have been the one in that car." Maybe he was right. Maybe I've been trying to make up for that my whole life, paying debts that couldn't be paid. But as the hours passed, I realized something else. No amount of guilt justifies letting someone destroy you. Family or not. At dawn, I took the old prepaid phone from my bag, the one he didn't know about, and threw it into the motel trash can. Then I drove west until I found a small town with no chain stores, no traffic lights, and a single post office. That's where I stopped. When I rented a room above the hardware store, the owner asked for my name. Walter, I said. Just Walter. No Grandpa. No Mr. Grady. Just a man starting over. That was the last day I was a grandfather. The day I stopped existing for someone who thought I was a wallet with a heartbeat. The day I stopped apologizing for surviving. And as I closed the door of that dusty little room behind me, for the first time in years, I didn't feel old. I just felt alive. When April died, Liam was 9. He had a gap in his front teeth and a quiet way of watching people that made you think he was older than he was. He didn't cry at the funeral. Not once. Just held my hand in that tiny, bony grip like it was the last thing tethering him to the earth. His father didn't show up. Not to the hospital. Not to the burial. Not even when the state called him to take custody. Just vanished like cowards tend to. I was 60 at the time, still working part-time loading trucks. I was supposed to retire early and spend the rest of my life fishing in peace. But instead, I walked into family services the Monday after April's funeral and signed the custody papers like they were a death sentence I fully deserved. The first year was quiet. Liam didn't talk much. He didn't act out, didn't scream, didn't ask where his dad was. He just waited, like he was holding his breath for the other shoe to drop. I did everything I could to prove to him that it wouldn't. New clothes, a Nintendo, summer camp. I started packing his lunch with little post-it notes that said things like, "You're stronger than the world, kid." I read a book on grief in children. The author had a PhD and no damn idea what he was talking about. Looking back, maybe that was my first mistake, trying to fill the hole with things. When he was 12, he punched a kid at school for making fun of his mom being dead. They suspended him for 3 days. When I picked him up from the office, he sat in the passenger seat with a split knuckle and said, "I didn't want to hit him, but he said she probably died to get away from me." And I didn't tell him not to fight. I told him I was proud. That night, I ordered him pizza and let him stay up playing video games until 2 in the morning. I thought I was rewarding honesty, protecting him, but I was planting the first seed of something I wouldn't recognize until it was too late. Liam wasn't a bad kid. Not then. He was just broken. And instead of teaching him how to rebuild, I kept trying to shield him from every storm. When he turned 15, I bought him his first phone. An iPhone, way more expensive than I could afford. But I told myself it was important for him to feel normal. Like he wasn't the kid with the dead mom and the ghost dad. I picked up extra shifts, ignored the chest pain that was starting to creep in at night, and paid off that phone in 18 months. By the time he was 17, he'd stopped asking for things. He just expected them. His grades dropped. He lied constantly, where he was, who he was with. Once, he stole my debit card and bought concert tickets for a girl he barely knew. I confronted him, and he cried, told me he was lonely. I didn't cancel the tickets. I just gave him cash for the gas. And when he wrecked my truck senior year, borrowed it without asking, drove it drunk into a street lamp. I sold April's jewelry to pay the insurance claim. Didn't say a word to him about the consequences, because in my head, he was still that boy at the funeral with the empty eyes. But he wasn't. Not anymore. After graduation, he told me he wasn't going to college. "College is for suckers," he said. "You can learn everything online now." I nodded like I understood. I didn't, but I nodded anyway. He moved into the spare bedroom and never moved out. No rent, no job, no effort. Instead, he found apps that let him trade crypto and sports bets and God knows what else. I'd hear him at 2 in the morning yelling at his laptop because some game didn't go his way. "Just a few thousand more, and I'll flip it into triple," he'd say. He never did. The fridge was always empty. My pension checks evaporated. And every month, I told myself the same lie. Just one more chance. One more push. He'll grow out of it. But he didn't grow. He consumed, like a king without a kingdom. Crowned in excuses, ruling over a house he didn't build, paid for by a man who was too tired to fight anymore. By the time he was 25, I was already refinancing the house a second time. I told myself it was for us, for the future. But there was no us. There was just Liam and the world he thought owed him something. And every time I tried to pull back, to set rules, to say no, he'd change tactics. Guilt, rage, silence. You wanted to end up like Dad. You're just like everyone else. You say you care, then turn your back. You should have let me go into the system. And every time I folded, because I loved him, because I raised him, because I couldn't bear the thought that I might have failed the only thing left of my daughter. But love, I learned, can rot if it has no discipline to hold it together. And I had given him everything, except one thing, the word no. And when I finally said it, that night, with the $80,000 loan papers in my lap, he looked at me like I'd betrayed him, like I had committed treason. But the real betrayal had happened years before, when I stopped being his grandfather and let myself become his servant. The first week after I left, I kept expecting to see him, in the rearview mirror, outside the motel, walking down the sidewalk of that dusty Arizona town with that same twisted smirk he always wore when he wanted something. But he never came. I rented a room above Carter's Hardware in a town so small, they didn't bother with speed limits. The place smelled like old wood and WD-40, and the woman at the diner already knew how I liked my coffee by day 3. I didn't tell anyone where I was. Changed my phone number, opened a new bank account, bought a burner phone with cash and used it once to call my pension company and reroute everything to my new address. That was it. No goodbye letter. No note on the fridge. No instructions. No hint. Just gone. I figured he'd panic. Call the cops. Post online. Maybe even cry to my old neighbor, Gail. He'd play the victim like he always did. My grandfather disappeared. I'm worried. What he meant was, my paycheck vanished. But nobody came knocking. No cops. No calls. Nothing. Turns out, the only thing more terrifying than being hunted is not being missed at all. By day 5, I started to sleep again. Real sleep, deep, dreamless. I woke up one morning and realized I hadn't clenched my jaw in days. My hands, once stiff from gripping the steering wheel in anger, now opened freely. I walked without that hunch of exhaustion. I was disappearing, and it felt good. Don Carter, the hardware store owner, offered me some hours behind the counter. Said I had the face of a guy who knows what a wrench does. He didn't ask where I came from. He didn't care. He paid in cash and trusted me with the keys by week 2. And just like that, I wasn't Liam's grandfather anymore. I was Walter. Just Walter. 2 weeks passed before the first letter came. Folded sloppy, no return address. Just Grady and sharp, angry pen. Inside, I know what you're doing. This is abandonment. You left. You're still responsible. You can't just run away from me. I need $12,000. I'll forgive you if you send it this week. No, dear Grandpa. No signature. No apology. He didn't want me. He wanted the vault I'd become. I burned the letter behind the hardware store with the cardboard from a box of new drills. Watched the flames eat the page like it never existed. 3 days later, another letter. This one longer. More venom. He blamed me for everything. His failed business. His girlfriend leaving. The eviction notice on my old house, which I'd left in his name. He said I set him up to fail. It was almost funny. I handed him a life on a silver platter, and he used the tray as a mirror for his own vanity. I didn't respond, didn't write, didn't even curse his name out loud. You see, the thing about narcissists like Liam is they don't fall, they crash. And when they do, they don't ask how it happened. They ask who's to blame. I kept waiting for that knock on the door. Some sheriff with a subpoena. Some lawyer trying to squeeze blood from the stone of my retirement. But all I got was silence, which meant Liam was running out of moves. So he tried one more. Guilt. The third letter came with an old photo. April, age 7, on a swing set. She was laughing, wild and open, hair in the wind. I took that picture. I remember the exact moment. The letter said, Mom would hate you for this. She wouldn't leave me like this. She loved me. Not like you. You're selfish. Cold. She wouldn't run. That one hurt. Not because of the words, but because I believed the picture might bring me back. Because a small part of me still wanted to be needed. Still believed I could fix what I broke. But then I thought about April. About how she begged me back when Liam was 10 and starting to lie about small things, to be stricter. How she said, don't let him grow up thinking the world owes him. And I didn't listen. I gave him the world instead. So I folded the letter, placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk, and never opened it again. A month passed. I got a library card. started reading books I never had time for, helped Carter fix up the back shed of the store, a place he was turning into a tool rental. I planted tomato vines in a crate outside my window, and slowly my days filled with nothing. Beautiful, simple, earned nothing. Then, one evening, Carter handed me a package. It was delivered to the store. No sender. Inside, my old wristwatch. The one I sold years ago to cover Liam's bail. There was no note. Just the watch. Broken. Glass cracked. Band torn. Dead. A message, clear as day. A reminder. You belong to me. He was telling me. You think you're free? You're not. I still own pieces of you. I held that watch for a long time. Not because I missed it, but because I finally understood. Liam never wanted love. He wanted ownership. Control. A man like that doesn't grieve. He punishes. And he wasn't finished yet. I'd cut the cord. But snakes slither, even with their heads halfway off. And I could feel him, not physically but spiritually, crawling closer. Heir to nothing, but still desperate to reign. 3 months had passed since I'd last seen his handwriting. And for a while, I started to believe he'd finally let go. The tomatoes outside my window were ripening. The air smelled of sawdust and warm oil from the shop below. Carter had started leaving the store keys with me at night. Said I was the most trustworthy man he'd ever hired. Funny how a lifetime of mistakes can still make you look dependable in a town that doesn't know your past. I'd started keeping a small notebook. Nothing fancy, just thoughts, names of people I met, the weather, things I wanted to remember. I didn't write about Liam. I refused to let his name stain this new chapter. But one afternoon, a stranger walked into the hardware store. Tall, polished shoes, crisp shirt, clipboard in hand. Didn't look like someone who needed nails or bolts. "Mr. Grady?" he asked, though he already knew. I froze for half a heartbeat. Depends who's asking. He smiled the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. I represent a client who's concerned about your well-being. He believes you may be in distress. There it was. Liam's new trick. "I'm fine," I said. "Tell your client he should try therapy." The man chuckled. "Sir, he's your grandson." "I don't have one. Legally speaking, he's filed a missing persons report. Claims you're being manipulated, possibly suffering from cognitive decline. He's requesting financial guardianship to protect your assets." My grip on the counter tightened until my knuckles went white. There it was, the cost of vanishing. You leave, and the vultures circle your name. I kept my voice calm. "I'm not missing. I'm retired." He flipped a folder open, showed me papers full of signatures and legal words that meant one thing: control. "He's very worried, Mr. Grady. He says you've been confused lately. Forgetful. Withdrawn. Withdrawn." I laughed. "Yeah, from my own damn bank account." The man frowned, closing his folder. "Sir, if you refuse to cooperate, a court can still." I leaned in close. "Tell Liam this. If he tries to touch 1 cent of my money, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure he never sees another dollar again. Not from me, not from anyone." He left without a word. Carter was watching from the back of the store, arms crossed. "Trouble?" he asked. "Just a salesman," I lied. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked circles in my tiny room, the floor creaking under my boots. He was escalating. Letters hadn't worked. Guilt hadn't worked. Now he wanted to use the system. The same system I'd spent my life paying into to declare me incapable. The next morning, I drove an hour to a lawyer's office in Winslow. The woman was young, sharp-eyed, efficient. "Mr. Grady," she said, flipping through my documents. "You want to transfer your accounts into a trust, with yourself as the primary beneficiary?" "That's right. And the purpose?" "Peace." She didn't ask more. She just nodded and drafted the paperwork. By noon, everything I owned, my pension, my savings, even the small piece of land I'd bought near the outskirts, was locked behind my own name, untouchable by anyone else. When I left the office, I sat in my truck, hands trembling. Not with fear, with adrenaline. With relief. With finality. He couldn't reach me now. Not legally. Not financially. But I knew him. He wasn't the kind of man who gave up when money was involved. He'd turn meaner. Desperate. He'd try to find me himself. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, he did. It was a Thursday. Hot, dry, the kind of afternoon that hums with insects. I was closing up the shop when I saw the dust trail of a silver sedan crawling down a main road. City plates, too clean for this place. It stopped across the street. He stepped out. Liam, he'd changed. Thinner, hair messy, jaw unshaven, but the arrogance was still there, glowing behind his sunglasses. For a second, we just stared at each other. He didn't smile. Neither did I. "So this is where you've been hiding," he said, walking closer. "A dump in the middle of nowhere." "I prefer quiet. Quiet's another word for lonely." I wiped my hands on my apron. "You should leave." He scoffed. "You think you can just disappear? Everyone thinks you're dead. Do you have any idea what that does to me?" "You're alive," I said. "You'll survive." He stepped inside the shop, ignoring the closed sign. "I need money," he said flatly. "I'm out of options." "You had plenty of options," I replied. "You just never liked the ones that involved effort." He slammed his palm against the counter. "You think you're better than me now? Living in this hole, pretending you're some martyr? You owe me, old man." I didn't move, didn't raise my voice. "I owed your mother love. I gave her that. I owed you a chance. I gave you that too. The debt's paid." Something flickered in his eyes then. Not anger, something uglier. "You're going to regret this," he whispered. He turned and left, the bell above the door jangling like nervous laughter. The silver sedan sped off, kicking up a cloud of dust that took a long time to settle. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed at the shop with the lights off, watching through the window. Every sound felt sharper. Every car that passed made my pulse jump. By dawn, I knew this wasn't over. Liam had crossed a line he couldn't uncross, and I was done playing defense. For 68 years, I'd been a provider, a protector, a fool with open hands. But there's a limit to how many times you can let someone burn your life down before you strike the match yourself. The cost of vanishing, I realized, wasn't the loneliness. It was what happens when the ghosts you left behind refuse to stay buried. And my ghost was coming for me. The morning after Liam showed up, the town felt different. It wasn't anything you could point at, just the air, heavier somehow. I swept the store twice, double-checked the locks, and still couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me from across the road. Carter noticed. "You look like a man expecting company," he said, tying up a box of bolts. "I already had it," I answered. Didn't like the visit. He didn't press. Small-town men know when not to ask. By noon, the sun was beating through the front windows. I stepped outside for air and saw fresh tire marks on the dirt shoulder, right where Liam had parked yesterday. The track for deeper now knew. He'd been back. That night, I drove home by a longer route. Every shadow on the road looked like headlights waiting to lunge out behind me. When I reached the trailer, my front door was ajar. No broken lock. No smashed window. Just open. Inside, drawers pulled halfway out. My few shirts tossed on the floor. He hadn't taken anything valuable, because there was nothing left to take. He'd only wanted me to know he'd been there. A warning. A promise. Or both. I sat on the edge of the bed until my pulse steadied, then grabbed the old shotgun from under the couch. I hadn't fired it in years. Cleaned it. Loaded 2 shells. Put it behind the door. I didn't sleep. At dawn, Carter knocked. "You all right, Walter?" Someone saw lights on all night. Couldn't sleep. I lied again. He nodded slowly, the way people do when they know the lie isn't for them. 3 quiet days followed. No letters. No phone calls. No car. Just silence. Then the fire. It was a Thursday night. I closed the shop, locked the register, gone out back to dump trash. When I turned around, orange light flickered against the windows of my truck. Gasoline smell hit first, then heat. The front seat was burning. Flames licking up the windshield, glass cracking like gunshots. I froze for half a second, then ran for the extinguisher by the door. By the time I killed the flames, half the cab was melted plastic and smoke. I knew exactly who did it. There was no need for proof. The fire wasn't meant to destroy. It was meant to announce. The cops came, took notes, shrugged. Could have been kids, the deputy said. Could have been a cigarette. Could have been my grandson, I replied. He raised a brow. Family trouble? Something like that. They promised to investigate. I knew they wouldn't. That night, I sat outside the smoldering truck with a cup of cold coffee, watching my reflection in the cracked side mirror. The firelight warped my face, one side calm, the other distorted. That's when it hit me. This was exactly what Liam wanted. To make me afraid. To remind me that even out here, miles from the life he ruined, I was still his captive. I looked at that reflection and realized I didn't recognize the man staring back. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't even a grandfather. I was a man who'd been cornered too many times and had finally stopped backing up. The next morning, I drove what was left of the truck out to a junkyard 30 miles away. Paid cash for a used pickup, dented, ugly, reliable. The kind of car nobody remembers passing on the road. Then I went home and packed a bag. Just essentials. Change of clothes, papers, the shotgun. If Liam wanted a ghost, I'd give him one. But before leaving, I did something I hadn't planned. I went back into town to the small post office near the diner, asked the clerk for a money order, and mailed it to an address I knew by heart. The old house back in Albuquerque. Exactly $1. Inside the envelope, I wrote one sentence. This is all you'll ever get. It wasn't revenge. It was punctuation. The end of a sentence that had dragged on for too many years. That evening, I told Carter I needed a few days off. Family business, I said. He nodded. You take care of it, Walter. And come back. Don't vanish. I won't, I said. But we both knew that depended on what came next. I drove west as the sun dropped, the road stretching endless and red. Every mile felt lighter, but the mirror kept pulling my eyes back, expecting headlights, that silver sedan. They never came. Just desert, wind, and the faint smell of smoke still clinging to my clothes. Somewhere past Flagstaff, I pulled over and watched the horizon burn with sunset. It looked a lot like the truck did. Beautiful, dangerous, final. That was the night I stopped running from him and started running through whatever came next. Because you can hide from a man, but not from the fire he lit inside you. And mine was just getting started. I didn't know exactly where I was going, just that I couldn't keep staying still. When a man like Liam smells fear, he doesn't go away. He circles, waits, presses harder. By the time I hit the state line into New Mexico again, it had been 6 days since the fire. No new letters, no calls, no signs. But I knew in my gut he hadn't disappeared. He was watching. I made my way east through the back roads, avoiding interstates, chain hotels, anything with cameras. Slept in the truck or tiny motels that didn't ask for ID. I'd done my disappearing once. Now I was doing reconnaissance. Because this time, I wasn't going to run. This time, I wasn't going to react. I was going to end it. I still had contacts in Albuquerque. Old friends, retired like me, with ears in places people forget to check. One of them, Henry, ran a tow yard now. Used to work with me back in the freight company days. I stopped by on a rainy Tuesday under a sky thick with mud-colored clouds. Damn, Walter, he said when I stepped out of the truck. I thought you were dead. Not yet, I said, but someone's working on it. I told him everything. I didn't sugarcoat it. Not the letters. Not the threats. Not the fire. Henry didn't flinch. He just leaned against an old Civic and shook his head. Boy's always been rotten. April didn't see it. Too much love blinds people. I nodded. I need to know where he is. He didn't ask why. 2 hours later, he handed me a slip of paper with an address. Rent by the week place off Wyoming. He's been crashing there with a girl named Bree, some TikTok wannabe. Armed? I asked. Only with delusions. But be careful, Walt. I've seen hate in people before, but not like this. He's not coming after you for money anymore. He's coming for power. That night, I parked across from the motel and waited. A rundown joint with flickering vacancy signs and cigarette burns on the walls. No doubt. Just before midnight, I saw him. Liam. He stepped out of room 6B in a hoodie, lighting a cigarette, talking loud to the girl inside. Still walking like the world owed him something. Still wearing that cocky, slow strut like a badge. But he looked worse than before, pale, twitchy, thinner. Like a junkie waiting for a fix. And maybe he was. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed the timing right. Instead, I waited another day. Bought a prepaid phone. Used it to send him a message. Meet me where we buried the dog. 6 p.m. tomorrow. No tricks. That was a test. Only 2 people knew where we buried Daisy, April's old shepherd. Him and me. He replied in seconds. You've got balls showing your face again. I'll be there. The next day, I drove to the empty lot behind my old house where Daisy's grave sat under the rusted clothesline. We'd buried her there when Liam was 10. He'd cried harder for that dog than he ever did for his mother. At 5:55, he showed. Alone. Hoodie. Eyes like flint. Nice of you to show up, Grandpa, he said. Guess the desert wasn't enough to hide you. I stood my ground. You burned my truck. He shrugged. Prove it. I don't need to. You just did. His grin faltered. You've got one last chance, I told him. Leave. Disappear. Get help. Get clean. Because the next time you come near me, I won't call the police. I won't run. I'll end it myself. He laughed. You? You're a coward. You've always been a coward. You didn't even fight for Mom. That name's still cut. But I didn't flinch. I gave her everything I could. Just like I gave you. No, he snapped. You gave me limits. That's not love. You know what love is? It's loyalty. Unconditional. Ride or die. And you left. No, Liam. I finally stopped dying for you. He stepped forward fast. Not to hit me, but to scare me. The old bully tactic. I didn't move. That froze him. He blinked. Jaw clenched. Then he smiled. You think this is over? He hissed. You think some tough words and a burned truck make us even? I reached into my coat pocket and handed him an envelope. He opened it. Inside, a copy of the trust documents. My assets. My will. Everything. And a notarized line that said Liam Grady, disinherited. His eyes scanned the paper. Face twisted. You're dead to me, he said, tearing it in half. I already was, I said. This just makes it legal. He didn't speak again, just walked away, paper pieces fluttering to the ground behind him. I stayed until he turned the corner and disappeared. Then I picked up the shredded papers, shoved them in my pocket, and walked to my truck. The weight on my chest had lifted. I didn't know if he'd vanish after this. I didn't know if he'd come back with something worse. But I knew this. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I wasn't protecting him anymore. And most importantly, I wasn't his anymore. The reckoning had come. And this time it had my name on it, not as that I drove all night. Didn't stop for food. Didn't stop for sleep. Just kept the tires moving west, across state lines, away from Liam, away from every grave I'd dug for myself over the last 20 years. When the sun rose behind me, I was already halfway home. My new home, back to the quiet town that hadn't asked questions when I arrived and hopefully wouldn't ask any now. I pulled into Carter's lot just before 7 a.m. He was already opening the store, keys jangling, coffee in hand. He took one look at me, red-eyed and road-worn, and said, "Did you bury the body, or just scare him off?" I cracked a tired smile. Closer to the second. He nodded. Didn't need more. I spent the rest of the morning unloading crates, stocking shelves, cleaning. My hands needed something to do. My mind didn't want quiet yet. I'd been quiet too long. After lunch, I walked across the street to the little diner. Marta was there. She always was. Same table by the window, same book in her hands. I slid into the seat across from her. She didn't look surprised. Just folded her bookmark, set it on the table. "You're back," she said. "I am. You done running?" "I think I am." She studied me, her face unreadable. Then, "Do I need to worry about someone following you in here with a gun?" I laughed, real and sudden. The first honest laugh in months. "No," I said. "Not unless they're allergic to pancakes." We sat there in silence for a while. The waitress refilled our coffee, and Marta finally said, "You look tired. Not just in sleep tired. Done tired." "I'm done," I said. "But not with life. Just with him." I told her everything, or at least enough. The letters, the fire, the confrontation at Daisy's grave, the look in his eyes when he realized he couldn't scare me anymore. Marta listened the way only someone who's lost something can. Not a single interruption. No advice. No judgment. Just presence. When I finished, she said, "So what now?" And I realized I didn't know. For the first time in my life, there was no problem to fix. No fire to put out. No child to protect. What now? I went back to my trailer that night and sat on the front steps. Watched the stars come out. They looked different now, like they belonged to me again. There was a letter waiting in the mailbox. No name on the front. I opened it slowly, expecting poison. But it wasn't from Liam. It was from his ex-girlfriend. "Bree." "Walter? I know we've never met." I found your address in some old mail he had lying around. He doesn't know I'm writing you. I just wanted you to know I left him. For good. He told me stories about you. Half of them lies, the other half twisted. I see now what kind of man he is. And I see what kind of man you are, too. You tried. That's more than most ever do. I'm sorry for what he became. You deserve better. Bree, I held that letter for a long time. Not because it changed anything, but because it didn't have to. It was a small mercy, someone else seeing the truth. A stranger who owed me nothing writing the words I'd wanted to hear from Liam for years. I folded the letter, placed it in the drawer where I kept the others, the court papers, the disinheritance, the ashes of everything that had come before. Then I locked the drawer. The next day, I met Carter before opening. I want to buy in, I said. He looked up from his inventory clipboard. Buy in, half the business. Full partnership. I've got the savings. The trust fund secure. He blinked, then smiled slow. Well, I'll be damned. The ghost wants to stay. I'm tired of drifting, I said. I want something that's mine. We shook hands like men do when they've both seen some things and still chose hope. That night, Marta invited me over for dinner. She made stew and cornbread, played old records. We talked about books, not trauma, about tomatoes, not tombstones. It was nothing, and it was everything. That's when I knew. The final inheritance wasn't money, wasn't property, wasn't legacy. It was peace. The kind you earn when you finally stop giving yourself away to people who don't want you. Just what you can offer. Liam might never change. He might burn more lives before he hits his bottom, if he ever does. But I wouldn't be there for it. Not out of cruelty. Out of survival. I didn't know him anything anymore. Not because I'd stopped loving him, but because I'd finally started loving myself. I still think about April sometimes. About the day she handed me her boy and whispered, "Don't let him fall, Dad." I tried, April. God knows I did. But some falls can't be stopped. Not by money, not by guilt, not even by love. Some people have to hit the bottom themselves before they even consider climbing back up. I'll be here if that day ever comes. But not holding out my hands. Just watching for solid ground. My name is Walter Grady. I am 68 years old. I work in a hardware store. I grow tomatoes in crates. I read. I laugh. I sleep through the night. I'm no longer a ghost. I'm no longer a hostage. I'm no longer a grandfather. I am just a man. Finally whole. Finally free. Finally mine.